What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the My Side of the Block podcast. My name is Bob. I'm your host. Today, we got a good one for you guys. But I want to give a quick shout out to us right now because we just started our YouTube page. So if you're listening to me on audio, be sure to click the link in the description of this podcast that is talking about our YouTube page. And if you're watching on YouTube, welcome. Glad to have you here. But we got a lot of different stuff coming up on the page, so be sure to check out the actual channels of the page because we got different podcasts on there. We got different groups and things that we're going to be doing with the podcast page with this group page. And if you want to check out the audio alone of the podcast, be sure to go to your favorite podcasting app, and that could be any of them. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple, we're on Google, we're on Stitcher, we're on Anchor, any podcasting app, we're on it. Be sure to go onto that app and look up My Side of the Block podcast. We're on it. You can listen to us there. Be sure to check us out on all social media platforms. We got our Facebook group, The Stoop Life, which you want to be a part of because all of our information goes right there. Or check us out on Instagram at _Stoop_Life. We're active on there. Be sure to check us out. We got a lot of stuff coming up on there. But today, guys, I want to give you a quick hitter. We don't talk about this subject enough. But I feel like going forward, we're going to be talking about it more. I'm talking about Major League Baseball. The reason I want to talk about Major League Baseball is simply because the Hall of Fame just commenced their votings. And it's an absolute mockery of the sport. Major League Baseball Hall of Fame is supposed to be a history of the sport. Yet, for some reason, these voters continue to throw away the history of the sport. They continue to throw away the legacy of things that should be in the Hall of Fame, that Cooperstown and the Hall of Fame should represent and show, because it's a big, big part of the history of the sport. Now, I want to give my shout out to David Ortiz for making the Hall of Fame, because in my opinion, I believe David Ortiz rightfully earned his spot in the Baseball Hall of Fame. But I want to talk about it a little bit. Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens got left off the Hall of Fame ballot. It was their last Hall of Fame bout they were allowed to be on. 0 for 10. They got locked out. Absolutely asinine. Both of them should be on. And I'm going to tell you why right here. David Ortiz, great player, stand-up guy, loved by the fans, loved by the media, one World Series caliber player, MVP caliber player, and rightfully so. But there's one thing I have a problem with. And it's one thing why I want to talk about it. David Ortiz failed a steroid test. The only thing is, he failed a steroid test before the banned substance was banned by Major League Baseball. We all know that Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds, one reason they're not in the Hall of Fame is because, quote unquote, they took steroids. But they just voted in a guy that failed a steroid test, when Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens never actually failed. Now, I'm not saying Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens weren't on steroids, because we all know the triple growth in the head of Barry Bonds is proof enough to show he was on steroids. But I want to break it down even further. David Ortiz, prior to taking steroids, was not a great player. Hell, he was barely even a good player. He barely even made a roster. Couldn't hit for shit. Couldn't do anything. Prior to him taking the steroids and failing, his career shot up drastically. Amazing player. But if you break it down, the reason why David Ortiz got a lot better wasn't because he took the steroids. It was because he fixed his mechanics. Steroids might have just helped him in a little bit here or there, but David Ortiz became a Hall of Famer because he fixed his mechanics. But he did fail a steroid test. And his career before was ass. His career after, Hall of Fame worthy. You got a guy like Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens who never actually failed a steroid test. But you got a guy that did fail a steroid test and you vote him in. Hall of Fame voters continually say that they don't vote these guys in because of the steroids. But you just voted a guy in that did steroids. Makes absolutely fucking no sense. So there's another reason why Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds didn't get in. And that's one of the main reasons. Nobody liked them. David Ortiz was very liked by the media, loved by the fans. Where if you ever watched an interview with Barry Bonds or an interview with Roger Clemens, nobody really liked them. Nobody liked them. Barry Bonds was an asshole. He hated the media. Absolutely hated them. He loved his fans, but he hated the media. Same with Roger Clemens. So now you got guys who cheated, never got caught, but were assholes to the media. Very political. The only reason they're not in is because it's political. But I want to talk about their careers prior to steroids. And that's exactly why they should be in. You could take away the post-steroid careers of Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds, throw it away, take all the statistics away, and just use their careers before any sense of steroids was in their body or careers, and they're both Hall of Famers. You got Roger Clemens, won 7 total Cy Youngs. He's the leader in Cy Youngs in Major League Baseball history. He won 5 of those Cy Youngs before the steroid era. 5 Cy Youngs prior to the steroid era for Roger Clemens. He won 2 after. Not only did he do that, he won 2 Triple Crowns prior to the steroid era. He led the league in strikeouts 3 times prior to the steroids. He did it again after. Now I got Barry Bonds. He was an MVP 2 times. Might have been 3. 2 or 3 times prior to steroid era. He was an all-star every single year before the steroid era. That's 8 or 9 years prior to the steroid era. On top of that, guys, he was top 10 in stolen bases, top 10 in fielding percentage, top 10 in total hits, top 10 in runs, top 10 in batting average, top 10 in walks prior to the steroid era. On top of that, he won 6 Gold Gloves prior to the steroid era. He won 5 Silver Slugger Awards prior to the steroid era. That's a Hall of Fame career before his head got big. We all know when Barry Bonds took steroids is roughly the 2001-2002 year. Prior to that, his numbers were phenomenal. You can actually relate them to Ken Griffey Jr. because the early career of Barry Bonds was the likes of Ken Griffey Jr. Very similar. Very, very similar. And we all know Ken Griffey Jr. is a first ballot Hall of Famer. Now, Roger Clemens. The only thing that changed for Roger Clemens when he took steroids was he beat Father Time. He was on a little bit of a downfall, and then all of a sudden he came back up. But he didn't get any better. He just stayed good. Roger Clemens' numbers during the steroid era and before are basically identical. He threw the same pitches. He threw the same speed. He had the same efficiency on his strikeout ratios, basically the same wins. And he won 2 Cy Youngs, where he won 5 before. Didn't really change much in how he played. It just allowed him to continue going more. Kind of reminds me of a Tom Brady type, where Roger Clemens was kind of on a decline and they just never stopped. Brady was never on a decline, but he beat Father Time, and the steroids allowed him to play further. But prior to the steroids, he's a Hall of Famer, Roger Clemens. And there's no way in motherfucking hell this man should not be in the Hall of Fame. Barry Bonds, prior to steroids, he just got stronger. That's about it. That's it. He didn't steal as many bases. He still hit as good. He just hit the ball further. The only reason Barry Bonds took steroids is because he was the best player in baseball. But nobody was talking about him at all. The media never wrote about him. He was one of the first players ever to have certain stats with home runs, stolen bases, hits, batting average, and walks in a year. Never talked about it. All they wrote about and all they talked about was Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa because they were hitting 50, 60 home runs. So when Barry Bonds took steroids, there's 2 things that changed for him. 1, he hit more home runs, and 2, he got walked more. He's the most walked player in baseball history. He has more intentional walks than Mike Trout has walks in his career by a landslide. Barry Bonds was the only player I've ever seen in my life that could have bases loaded, game tied, and they walked the motherfucker. That's how good he was. That's how good the guy was. That is Hall of Fame. Even with the steroids, Hall of Fame. How many Hall of Famers do you know that did what Barry Bonds did in the 2 parts of his career? How many guys on steroids do you know that could hit 50 home runs and steal 30 bases and get Gold Gloves? None. I don't see Mark McGwire or Sammy Sosa getting the Gold Glove. They didn't do it because they weren't as good as Barry. They didn't have the athletic ability as Barry. Barry Bonds is before steroids and with, combine the careers, I don't care, either careers or both. He is one of, if not the best baseball player in the history of the sport. Can't argue that. It's facts. He's top 3, however you look at it. In my opinion, he's number 1. We're going to talk about that. I challenge you to fucking debate that. Barry Bonds is the GOAT. But the fact that these voters didn't put these guys in because of their accolades before any accusations of steroids is absolutely asinine. It's absolutely asinine. I agree with them that Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire should not be in the Hall of Fame. Should not be in the Hall of Fame because they are clear cheaters for their entire careers. The steroids didn't make them stay about the same. The steroids made them better. Clearly better. Made them more prolific, stronger. Without the steroids, they wouldn't have had that career. And on top of that, Sammy Sosa corked his bat and did a whole bunch of other shit that he cheated. Neither of them should be in the Hall of Fame. But you vote a guy like David Ortiz in who failed a steroid test, but you say the reason you don't put Barry and Roger in is because of steroids. Come on. Let's be real. It's bullshit. Baseball Hall of Fame voters are a fucking joke. The Baseball Hall of Fame is a joke. The Hall of Fame leaves out the all-time home run leader, the all-time Cy Young leader, and get this, they leave out the all-time hits leader, Pete Rose, because he bet on the sport. Yet, we all know, Major League Baseball profits a fuck ton of money on a yearly basis because they bet on their own sport. Very ironic. But yet you keep this guy out. You got 3 historic players, 3 of the best players ever played the game, and they're not in the Hall of Fame. Makes no sense. The Hall of Fame is supposed to be the history of the sport. You put these guys in, you put a little plaque, explain their history, put them in a different room, but they should be in. I think when it's all said and done in 20, 30 years from now, when our generation's all grown up, nobody's going to care about the Hall of Fame. We're going to make our own Hall of Fame. Because Barry Bonds and Roger Clements should be in the Hall of Fame. That's that. Simple as that. Barry is the GOAT, in my opinion. If you want to debate that, call me. I'll do a debate between Barry and Ken Griffey. Let's get it going. I would love to do it. It'd be a fun debate. I'll even rock a Griffey jersey while I use Barry Bonds. So let's do it. Thanks for joining in, guys. We'll talk to you guys next time.